Hi, so get ready now to follow our instructions on Ciao Andrea. This is a great unisex oversized shirt with a polo neckline without any buttons, and it's designed with side splits. It's great for layering over trousers. It's got the back, which is slightly longer to the front, so that gives it a more contemporary look. And then you've got these great wide sleeves that can be either the 3/4 length, as in the pattern, or you can customize and make them longer or shorter. It's a great piece as well to play around with, so you can also lengthen the oversized shirt and make a dress out of it. So keep watching, and then you'll see at the end all the different ways to transform your oversized shirt, Ciao Andrea. So happy sewing. So now we're going to start with attaching the facings. So we're starting by placing the front pattern piece of our pattern on the table with the back side facing upwards, and we're going to start to position the two placket facings. We are positioning these with the correct side of the fabric facing downwards. So it's difficult to see from our video because we didn't use a patterned fabric, but the correct side is actually underneath, and we're pinning a couple of millimeters from the edge of the main fabric on each side of the opening. Now we're going to sew down the area that we've just pinned, so the area of the facings that we've attached to the main part of the body, and we're going to sew with a 0.5 seam allowance from the edge. We're going to sew down both sides, starting always with a back stitch to secure our stitching and finishing with a back stitch at the end of the stitching line. We're sewing just as far on both sides as the notch. Now we need to make an incision that's like the shape of a swallow's tail at the bottom of the opening. So we're going to cut right into the point where you'd previously stitched, and be careful not to cut through the stitches. So now we have to press the part we've just done. So we're going to press the seam allowance that you've just sewed towards the inside, so towards the facing. Then we're going to press part of the facing you've just attached by 1 centimetre. And then we're going to fold this over again and press to cover the seam you've sewn. Once we've done one side, we're going to repeat this process of pressing and folding on the other side of the placket. So we're going to press the seam inwards that we've just sewn, and then we're going to, that's towards the middle of the facing, and then we're going to fold over by 1 centimetre the placket. There's also another part of the placket that hasn't been attached that we have to, where the stitching finished, the bottom of the placket, we're going to fold that in a bit by 1 centimetre, and then we're going to fold everything over again, as I said, to cover the stitching that we previously sewed. Once we've pressed that in place, we're going to then turn over the garment, and we're going to press it from the front side, making sure that the placket base is flat and neat. Now that we've pressed our placket, it's probably a good idea as well just to pin it to hold it in place. And we're going to start on the front side, and we're going to sew along the outside edge of the folded over facing. We're going down as far as the notch, and then using a back stitch at the notch to secure it well. At this point, the excess of this side of the facing needs to be trimmed back. Now we're going to turn our garment over onto the back side, and we're going to close this point. So this is the base of our placket. We're going to stitch along this line, making sure you're only stitching through the placket layers at the bottom. Now turn the fabric over again to the front side and ensure that both sides of the placket are in a straight line. We're going to start on the part from the point that we finished off previously, so that's at the bottom of the placket, and we're going to start with a back stitch to secure the thread. We're going to then sew around the edge of the placket, and as you are sewing, make sure that the excess placket facing is inside, so it's been folded in and there's no raw edges showing. And you continue to stitch along this line right up to the neck opening. Now we're going to start to prepare the pockets, and we'll start by overlocking around all of the edges of the 2 pocket pieces with our overlocking machine. If you don't have an overlocking machine, a zigzag stitch will be perfect for this operation. Now we're going to position our magnetic sewing gauge in place for a 1 centimetre seam allowance. Then we're going to take the pocket on the wrong side, and as far as the notch, we're going to fold down and pin in place. This is our pocket opening. We're going to do the same on the other side. At the notch, we're going to pin in place. Then we will sew down both sides, starting with a back stitch and finishing again with a back stitch. We're going to sew down both sides of the pocket opening. Now turn the pocket right side out and carefully pull out the corners using an awl. Next, with the wrong side facing, we're going to turn up a 1 centimetre hem all around the sides and the bottom edge of the pocket and press this well in place, ready to attach to our garment. So now we've pressed totally the pocket and it's ready to attach to the front piece. Now we're going to secure the turned edge by stitching along the reverse side of the pocket along the line of the overlock stitching. Now we're going to pin the pocket piece to the front part of the shirt at the points marked on the fabric. So we pin this in place, and then we're going to stitch around the edges of the pocket. Remember to use a back stitch at the top corners of the pocket for reinforcement. Now we're going to place the back yoke with the front side facing upwards. On top of this, we're going to place the back of the shirt piece, again with the front side facing upwards. And then to finish, we will place the other part of the yoke, the outer piece, on the top, this time with the wrong side facing upwards. So we're going to pin all these 3 layers together, making sure that all the notches are matching up. We will then stitch with a 1 centimetre or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance along this line, making sure that all the 3 pieces are together as we sew. Now we'll remove the sewing gauge because we're going to turn the garment over and we're going to need to top stitch along this area of the yoke. This will secure the yoke seam. We must make sure that we're only stitching that layer and nothing else is underneath, so the other part of the yoke is well out of the way. Now we're going to turn the shirt around so we have the back yoke to the wrong side, and we're going to pin the front side of the shirt to the inner piece of the back yoke. So at the shoulder point, we're going to pin those 2 pieces together. Then we're going to take the underside of the back yoke. That's the part that will be hidden, and we're going to bring it round to the front to pin everything together. Here we're pinning the right side of the back yoke with the right side of the front of the shirt, and we're creating like a sausage effect. Once we've pinned along the shoulder seam, we will sew all 3 pieces together. That is the front shirt, the outer yoke and the inner yoke along the shoulder seam with a 1 centimetre seam allowance. Sewing just these 3 pieces, and then we will pull out the shirt through this opening so that when we pull it out onto the other side, we will see our front of our shirt with the shoulder ready to do the top stitching along the shoulder line. Now we're going to top stitch the shoulders to secure the finished seam. So we stitch along the very edge on both sides of the shoulder point. We need to start to prepare the collar. So we'll start by ironing a lightweight interfacing onto the wrong side of 1 collar piece and 1 collar band. Now we're going to take the 2 pieces for the collar, and right sides together we're going to start to pin. So our interfacing will be showing at the top and we'll pin all around the edges so that we can then start to sew with a 0,5 seam allowance. As you get to the point of the collar, stitch slightly beyond that, and then we're going to turn the fabric and stitch along the edge again, along the with a 0.5 centimeter distance from on the interfacing piece that we're stitching along. Again, when we get to the point, we're going to go slightly beyond it, and then we're going to finish at the end with a back stitch. Now we're going to trim all around our collar. So we'll start by trimming, and when we get to the point, so we're trimming along the side, and then we get to the point, we're going to do a little snip, so like a V. So we're going beyond the stitching, don't cut too close to the stitching on that point. And then we carry along, trimming all around the edge. And again, when we get to the other point of the collar, we're going to do this form of V cutting, and then down to the edge. Along the edge that we haven't sewn yet, we're still going to trim back that. So we're cutting to trim right up against the interfacing. Turn the collar inside out. Use an awl to carefully pull out the points. Now with our steam iron, we're going to press all around the collar. Now we're going to stitch around the collar at a distance of 0.5 centimetre. So we're going to stitch around the edge of the collar and the top part of the collar. Then we'll turn the collar over and we're going to stitch along the bottom edge of the collar. Now we're going to prepare the collar band. So we're pressing, turning up the fabric over the interfacing on the bottom edge, the slightly rounded edge of the collar band. Now we're going to sew the part that you've pressed at 0.5 centimetres. So we're going to sew along the collar band, and then on the other side of the collar band where we've got some excess fabric, we're going to trim that away up to the line of the interfacing. Now we need to attach the collar to the collar band. So what we're going to do is we're going to lay on the table the collar band that hasn't had the adhesive attached to it, and that we lay right side up. We're then going to take our collar and we're going to snip it at the bottom of the collar, at the centre half back of the collar. We're going to make a notch, and we're going to lay that on top of our collar band. And then we're going to take the collar band that we've attached the adhesive to, and we're going to start to line that up with the other two pieces, matching the notches of the collar and the collar band. We're going to pin along the raw edge. So being careful to match up everything, we're pinning along the raw edge. And then we're going to sew along this area with a distance of 0.5 centimetres. Once we've finished sewing along the area, we're going to then finish that area. We're going to then sew around the two rounded edges of the collar band. Then we are going to trim away any excess fabric. So now we have finished attaching the collar to the collar band. We've trimmed away the excess fabric. We're going to turn the collar inside out, and now it's ready to be pressed. Now we're going to press our collar and collar band that we've attached. We're going to press front and back of the collar, and then we're going to trim the bottom part of the collar band. Now don't trim all the fabric away. We're going to trim just back so that we leave 0.5 centimetres of fabric. Now we're going to attach the collar to the shirt. So we start with the upper band and we're attaching that to the shirt. So we fold the collar in half to find the centre back, and we attach the under part of the collar band, that's the piece with the exposed seam allowance, to the shirt neck opening. So once we've pinned that, matching it all up, we're going to sew with a 0.5 seam allowance. Now we're going to pin the rest of the collar band, that's the folded over edge, matching up all the notches, the centre back of the collar with the centre back of the shirt and the shoulder marks. To do a good job here, we're going to start sewing this area that we've just pinned, starting from the shoulder. So we're going to sew the collar band with a top stitch, so right on the edge of the seam, and we're going to continue along the shoulder seam, and then we're going to continue to sew top stitching around the rounded part of the collar band edge, and then again top stitching around the top part of the collar band to finish again at the shoulder, at the point where we started. Now we're going to overlock the sleeves. We're overlocking the end of the sleeves, that's the wrist cuff opening. So once you've finished one sleeve, you repeat the same process for the second sleeve. Now we're going to press the part that we've overlocked. We're turning it up 8 centimetres for the finished hem of the cuff of the sleeve. So repeat that for both sleeves. Now we're going to attach the sleeve. So on the front part of the shirt, there's one notch at the armhole opening, and that we match up with the sleeve, one notch, and we continue to pin the sleeve to our garment. When you see the 2 notches, that's where we're attaching the sleeve to the back part of the shirt. And once we've finished pinning and matching up the notches, we're then going to sew the sleeve to the shirt with a 1 centimetre seam allowance. Now we've attached the sleeve to the body, we're going to finish our armhole by overlocking the edges of the part that we've just sewn. Now we're going to overlock the side seams and the bottom of the shirt. So we're going down the side seam and then along the bottom of the shirt with our overlocking machine. If you don't have an overlocking machine, you can use a zigzag stitch. So now we're going to pin the sides of the shirt and the sleeve. So we start pinning the sleeve, matching up the notches and the seams, and we'll pin right down to where we have the last notch, which is where there's the side slit. So once we've pinned this area, we're going to sew with a 1 centimetre seam allowance along the pinned edge, stopping at the last notch, and there we'll finish with a back stitch. Now we're going to press open the side seams of the shirt. So we're pressing along the seams that opening them along the seams that we've just sewn. And we're also going to press 1.5 centimetres along the side slits. So we start to press, turning up 1.5 centimetres on the side slits, and then also along the hem of the bottom of the shirt. You'll see that the front part of the shirt is actually shorter than the back, and this is what we wanted on this design. Now we're going to prepare to mill to the corner of our side slit. So we open the pressed corner and fold the corner pieces together and then down. We mark a line with tailor's chalk, and you're going to sew along this line. Then we'll turn inside out the point. Now we're going to sew the hem and the bottom hem and the side slits. So we'll start a little way at the back of the shirt, sewing along the hemline, and then we'll start to sew along the side slits. When you get to the top of the side slit, it's nice to do a little V stitching around the side of the split, then down to the bottom of the end of the split, and then along the bottom rest of the hem of the shirt. Now we're going to finish off the sleeve by pinning the hem of the shirt sleeve. That's the area that we've already turned up and pressed. So we're going to pin it. The hem height is 8 centimetres based on the initial press. And we're going to sew the hem in place, top stitching on the wrong side of the shirt. If you've been watching the video and making your garment, you're now at this final stage of pressing. Congratulations, you've got your Ciao Andrea shirt ready to wear, trimming up any loose threads. And there's so many variations you can do on this shirt, so do keep an eye out on other videos that we're going to post.